Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Harvey here today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today, joined by a very, very special guest, ultra runner John Frey. This man competes in ultra races, including 100-mile races. That's something you don't hear every day. As always with my interviews, we're not just talking about sports, though. Today, we're going a lot deeper, talking about mental health, addiction, and how anything is possible if you put your mind to it. John has an incredibly inspirational story from where he started to where he is now and everything that's yet to happen in the future because the future is very bright as well. So thank you all for listening. And John, thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon and everything to do this, basically. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Liam. I appreciate you reaching out and looking forward to sharing my story today.
Absolutely. So, obviously, you've achieved some amazing things in the sport of ultra running, including your fundraising as well. I should have mentioned that. We'll get into that shortly. Before we do, you're having this incredible success nowadays with everything you're doing, but your life wasn't always like this. As I understand it, your life wasn't always like this very recently, and you've struggled with addiction. I'm always aware how brave it is to speak about these things in public. Very, very brave thing to be doing when you've been through a hard time. If you don't mind sharing with us, John, where did those sorts of issues actually start with you? Is it something that went back to your childhood, or is it something that came over you more as an adult type of thing?
Yeah, after being sober for several years now, I've realized that it kind of went back to some early childhood stuff about, I guess I think I was kind of set up to be kind of an alcoholic from having this kind of, just general fear of people, places, things, being very shy person when I was young and maybe not learning how to deal with my feelings correctly. And, as soon as I was in my early teens and took something that could change the way I feel and take away some of that fear of public speaking and people and things like that. First time I touched alcohol and some certain drugs, I was just kind of automatically in love with them. So, the substance abuse started pretty early for me. It was actually, catching a little buzz off cigarettes and tobacco early, and then turned in quickly into, reaching for the parents' liquor cabinet and things like that. So, and it was just a progressive disease from there on that, the next 20 so years would kind of drag me down. So we can get into that a little bit more soon if you want.
Yeah, well, you should know, John. First of all, in my interviews, I never dwell on anything negative. Do you know what I mean? I never like to get into the nitty-gritty of, this happened, that happened, because, people are on the show talking about things that are painful for them. You're talking about things that can't be easy to talk about. So everything I ask is always geared around how you overcame it, how you came out the other side, how you found a light at the end of the tunnel, because not to sound cliche, but if you can do it, someone else can do it as well. And if there's someone listening to this going through addiction, then and it helps them, then we've done our work, even if it touches one person, although I'm sure it'll touch more. Yeah, I mean, not so much details, but just in terms of just to give people the perspective of this, what was your life like? I mean, were you doing the like drinking alcohol, doing drugs sort of every single day, or was it more like you were into binges from time to time? Or just touch on that briefly, and then we'll move on from this into the recovery, if that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like to dwell on the bad part because a lot of people know that part, and it's really about what I did to kind of get over that. But it started as kind of a social thing back in high school, a way to feel better, and it was kind of carefree back then, and fun. Even looking back all the way back in high school, it was always, once I'd been introduced to alcohol, it was, surviving the week, and it was always looking forward to what I'm going to do that weekend, how I'm going to get alcohol, what we're going to do. So my thoughts were always kind of consumed around that. I went through high school with kind of that, and I was still very good in school, had good grades, just looked like kind of an average guy in high school, still played sports and did well and all this kind of stuff. And, it was, I guess alcohol would say it was my friend there for a lot of years, even going through college, it was drinking heavily, doing drugs, um, you know, cocaine, pills, all that kind of stuff. But it was still manageable to me back then. It was Thursday through Sunday. I could pull it together and go back with my week. But as everyone knows, this is kind of a progressive disease, and instead of kind of ending that when I got done with college, I continued to do that, and into my professional careers and things like that. It was, kind of drowning myself in alcohol at night. And eventually it led to some really nasty things where I lost my job. I hit a point where I started finding comfort in that morning drink, was like really when I started to head downhill. Usually it was, I'll wait till I get off work to calm these nerves. And then, when I started to figure out I could have a little vodka in the morning and the shakes would go away, I wouldn't be sweaty. And, it really took me downhill from there. And as most people know, when an alcoholic starts drinking in the morning, they don't just stop. You got to have that, you got to keep up all day long. So that turned into job loss, all this different kind of stuff. Eventually to where I was drinking all day, every day. I was unemployed, a huge burden to my parents, didn't have a house under my name or anything, just kind of couch surfing, things like that, where I turned in and started having alcoholic seizures, overdoses, things like that. And finally just hit a breaking point where, I'd had enough and my body had had enough and I was in really bad shape.
Yeah. Well, John, I have to say, thank you very much for putting that out there. Um, I never want to pull anything out of people with the bad times they've been through. And the only reason I ask that question is just to set the stage of where you've come from, to where you are now. Absolutely incredible transformation. And as I've already said, what one man can do, another can do. So people hearing that, it gives them hope. So obviously, one other small question, not so much about that, but when you were in high school and everything, were you doing any sports then in your younger years, or was your sporting interest, your sporting journey, did that only start with running, if that makes sense?
Yeah, the sports things, I was always good at sports, athletic. I was really good in baseball. I had actually a scholarship to go play in college, but I chose to, I thought that would get in the way of my partying a little too much. So I turned that down, which, in hindsight is just kind of madness. But I was running some. I wasn't a long distance runner, but I would go run some in high school when I enjoyed it. I'd done a few trail runs when I was younger, and which is what I'm really into now. And looking back on it was just, something that I really loved. Um, and, so I was good. I played basketball. I did all sorts of stuff. Always been in, long hiking, fly fishing, getting out, being active kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool. So again, it sets the stage for your early athletic ability, which obviously is coming to fruition now. So in terms of the recovery, we'll talk about this a little bit, and we'll get into the running, full swing, past, present, or future. We just have to give people the context, just for anyone who hasn't heard your story before. A lot of people have, but a few people might be hearing this the first time. You never know. So in terms of when you decided you had to make a change with your lifestyle, you've gone far enough, you couldn't go any further, and something had to give, basically. Can you describe, first of all, what the inspiration was to stop living that way and change things, and what that period of time with your recovery was like a little bit, especially in the early days of sobering up, if that makes sense, please?
Yeah, sure. So I reached what most people call this jumping off point, where I'd gotten to a point where alcohol wasn't working anymore. I was scared of noises and situations. I'm almost scared to go outside in certain situations, whether I had alcohol or I didn't have alcohol. And it had just turned into a mess. I was in all sorts of legal trouble, facing jail, prison time, some pretty serious consequences, going to court and stuff. And I couldn't stop drinking long enough to where I would just smell like booze in the courtroom. My lawyer would say, hey, you got to go home and come back another day. But that jumping off point where I either wanted to kill myself or, there was no clear path. It was either I'm going to get sober or I'm going to end this thing. And, me, like most good alcoholics, don't have the guts to go through with ending it all. So, I'd seen my brother who'd been sober for 20 something years and lead a really successful life and had tried to help me over the years to get past this. I'd seen him be successful. I'd dabbled in Alcoholics Anonymous a little bit. So finally reached that point where I was scared of going to prison. I was scared of doing anything. I was in and out of mental institutions, hospitals, that kind of thing. And finally, just one day, given up. I would always come up with all these reasons about why I didn't want to go to these rehab programs. Like, oh, they won't let me out for 30 days. It's almost like kind of jail, being locked up thing. So I found this program in Raleigh, which is where I live now, which is a free program, which is very important to me back then because I didn't have a job or insurance or any kind of money or anything. But it was an open door policy where, hey, if you want to do this, you can come in and do this, but the door's always open. You can walk out and leave anytime you want, kind of thing. And it was a long-term program, which scared me a lot back then. It was 12 to 15 month intensive program where you go live on this campus with 175 other men and kind of go through the 12 steps and get a good start in recovery and get some time on your belt, things like that. But that's where I started. One afternoon, I had just had enough. I was so confused about where to go and what to do. Didn't really have anywhere to turn. And luckily, my parents and my brother lined this place up and went and dropped me off one day and said, I only have to make this decision one time a day. And I started in that program and ended up, staying there, staying sober, really enjoying it. So that was the jumping off point of, I was so scared of everything. I didn't know what to do. This is the last house on the road kind of thing. But
Yeah. Like I said, man, you're pure inspiration because what one man can do, another can do. I know I keep saying that, but you show people you hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up at the end of the day, as they say. And it's amazing given what you've gone on to achieve. I got a lot of respect for you talking about this because it can't be an easy thing to talk about. So thank you very much for sharing that. So in terms of where running started, and I'm guessing that this would be after you finished that program, but correct me on the timeline where you decided to go back to that. What was the initial inspiration, the initial spark, if you like, where you sort of felt, okay, I want to go running, I need something to fill my time. Where did that all start for you, please?
yeah, so that's interesting. And I'll base this with anybody that's new in recovery. Like, if I can do this, anybody can, because I could never have imagined for 20 something years that I would be able to go through a week without having a drink or something change the way that I feel. And that's what scared me so bad. I was like, I'll go do this for a while. I'll go do that. I'll stay sober for a while, but I'm never stopping drinking completely. And I went into this program with that mindset, like, I'll do this for a while and see how it is. And, now we're going on almost 7 years, and it's completely changed my life and made everything so much better. But back to your question, initially, I had so much energy. I've been so sedated for years drinking. I couldn't sleep well when I first tried to get sober. I was in terrible shape. I was 36 years old. They put me on blood pressure medicine. I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now, sweating all the time. Couldn't do much of anything. But the only way I could kind of get through the day and get rid of all this nervous energy I had was to go running. I entered that program in August 19th, 2016. It was real hot outside. It felt good to sweat. It felt good to get up and do things and get rid of that energy so I could sleep a little bit better. I guess it was a little bit of a dopamine kick too. Also, just helped me deal with the day. that kind of thing. So if it hadn't been for running and physical activity, I don't know that I would have gotten through that. And it was a program where we had to walk, several miles up to this chapel every day to have class. Then we had to, they call it trudging, which is, a reference to the big book. And then we had to trudge downtown Raleigh to the soup kitchen, stand in line, eat there, trudge back to this chapel. So you end up walking 7 or 8 miles in this program, or if you were like me, you ended up running. So I did a lot of running just in the early stages of the program. And I also got introduced to a really cool fitness organization while I was in there that some outside guys bring in called F3, which is a free fitness program. It's always run by volunteers, and it's free, open to all men kind of thing. They brought this program in on Friday afternoons and Saturday mornings that we went and worked out on, and it gave me a lot of connection to some outside people in the program. Gave me a lot of hope, a lot of community, just a lot of true friends. So that's how I got into the physical activity. And then while I was at this program, there were a couple other guys that like to run too. And we started a recovery run club down there called Oak City Recovery Run Club. And we would have people from the outside come join us. We would get new guys in the program, and we would, a couple nights a week at 6 p.m. we would get running. The program Healing Transitions that I was in is on this huge park called Dix Park, real hilly, old, historic place in Raleigh that's great for running. So that's how I got into it. And then eventually we started this run club, and there was a guy who kind of started all my ultra running stuff named Charlie Engel. And I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's kind of original ultra marathon guy that did some crazy things, ran across the Sahara, did all this stuff. He's also in recovery and been sober for a long time. But he came to our recovery run club one night and ran with us and gave me a copy of his book, Running Man. And he was the influence, and he's the one that gave me this crazy idea. It said, hey man, you can run 20 miles right now. You could run 100 miles with me with this upcoming race that I'm doing. And that's kind of what kicked it all off back then. And I ended up going to run this little 1.6 mile loop with him called the El Zorro 24, which is actually the first ultra marathon that I did. So I'll let you reply back a little bit on that. I know I kind of ran off there a little bit, but that's where the running started.
Absolutely, man. No, not at all. I mean, it's an amazing story, and I love the passion that you share about that. Your face lights up talking about it. It's a wonderful thing. So nothing to apologize for at all. Amazing story. So yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. Obviously, pushing the boundaries, pushing your personal limits. Now, I've read somewhere in an interview you gave that you likened running to life in the sense of taking things 1 mile at a time, one step at a time. And I thought it was a really good comparison. But in the beginning, when you were training for the first 100-mile race that you did in terms of the training phase, what was that like for anyone who doesn't know in terms of how you build up the endurance one step at a time, basically?
Yeah, well, that's funny because I wouldn't say I did it a traditional way, and I'm just so I didn't do a whole heck of a lot of training for it. I'm just very stubborn, and I've been through a lot of pain in my life, and I found out that a lot of this ultra running stuff involves problem solving, getting through some pain, being okay with pain. Like, hey, I'm running 100 miles. This hurts. This sucks right now, but just like everything else, this too shall pass. I'll get through this. I signed up for this kind of thing. So I'd done a few like 20-mile runs. I'd done like a big relay in the mountains, North Carolina, called Blue Ridge Relay. So a little bit of training, but not too much. And Charlie Engel was the one that gave me the confidence, and I read Rich Roll's book, Finding Ultra, back then too, and was just very inspired by them. And he said it's just this loop. You don't have to run for 24 hours. You don't have to run 100 miles. He's like, just take this thing one lap at a time. And that's how I that comment that you said a minute ago, how I relate to this thing was, ultra marathons are really like that. It's kind of like my life in a nutshell, where you start off, things are going really well, things are easy, and then all of a sudden you get hit by weather or your body or dehydration or things like that, and you have to problem solve all these things. It's just me going through life, getting hit with this curveball of addiction, going through a lot of pain, but I'm coming out the other side and just keep going. And you can kind of live a whole lifetime doing a 100-mile ultra marathon and feel all those emotions of life, in my opinion. So it's easy to relate that. It's also easy to relate it to 24 hours a day. When I first did this El Zora race, I'm going to do one lap at a time until I can't do any more laps. And he's like, you can walk a lap, you can sit down for a while. And I went out there, and it absolutely crushed my body, but I ended up, running the whole thing. I actually ended up winning it. The El Zora 24, I think I finished in about 19, 20 hours, something like that. But I was completely crushed. I couldn't walk. I was hobbling along very bad, but it gave me that breakthrough to saying, hey, at one point in the race, I was going, mailboxes aren't that far apart here, maybe 100 feet in this neighborhood. I had to break it down. I'm going to run in this next mailbox, then I'm going to walk to the next mailbox. And so I had to break it down in little increments like that. And there's a lot of those in a 1.6-mile loop. And this is down in Clinton, North Carolina, pretty flat area. So there wasn't a whole lot of training in there. I just jumped in full force. And that's the way Charlie England and some guys had told me, is like, if you can run 20 miles, you can run 100. It's a lot more mental than it is physical. And I've come to find that that's very true for most of this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is the thing that fascinates me about running is, in that concept, you can strip away a lot of things about a person and just see the raw aspects of the mindset and everything. It's very profound. As I say, amazing description that you're giving of that race. I mean, as you're describing it step by step, I sort of feel like I'm there, and it's very vivid, and you don't get that too often. You mentioned about winning your first 100-mile race. I mean, very simple question, but how did that make you feel at that time? I mean, I'd imagine you probably exceeded your own expectations. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I can't gloat on it too much because there weren't a whole lot of people running it, but there were some seasoned people in there that were running it. So it was just kind of a shock to me. By the end of that race, I didn't really know what was going on, but it gave me a lot of confidence that, hey, if I can do this, I can do a lot of other things too. And it just solidified the fact that, hey, I love running, I love doing this, and I kind of love the pain part about it. Most, they say, a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible, it was really hard, I would never go do that again. But I was the type of guy, I was like, there was something, like the next few days I didn't want to go do anything, but there was something that happened that day when I was in pain out there, of overcoming that, of feeling really alive without any kind of drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And coming out on the other end of that I really enjoyed. And I was like, a couple of weeks later, I was signing up. Where can I do this again? Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. I mean, like I say, the turnaround, mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually. I mean, at every level of how you've sort of transformed yourself is profound. So yeah, let's walk through some of the races, because I know that you've obviously done races for fundraising. I think for certain charities, you've done a number of things. So how many of these races have you actually done all in all now?
Yeah, so I'm actually getting ready. I'm going out to Montana on Monday, which for you guys over there might not know, but it's on the other side of the United States. Huge, big state of lots of wilderness, huge mountains. I'm going out there to run, and that'll be my if I finish that, that'll be my 17th 100-mile finish. And then I've done, all sorts of distances, in lower than that, 50 milers, 50 Ks, that kind of thing. But yeah, I've just got into it and really loved trail running. That second race I went out and did a Zion 100 out in Utah in the Western United States and really enjoyed that. And then as far as the fundraising thing, I had seen some people do these fundraising 100-milers or fundraising races and things like that. I was looking for a way to give back to the program that I went through, because Healing Transitions is a free program. They're supported by the taxpayers of Wake County where we live and by private donations. But I was giving back through service, through sponsoring other men, through doing things like that. But I was like, I've lived there for over a year. How can I give back financially too, and get other people, gain awareness for the program, show other people, how it was for me, what I'm doing now. So I started an event called the Oakwood 24, and Oakwood is the name of the neighborhood that I lived in Raleigh, an old historic neighborhood, and it has this real historic cemetery called Oakwood Cemetery. It's one of the oldest in the United States, and real hilly place with no traffic. And I went down there and asked the cemetery director, this crazy idea, would you mind if I ran for 24 hours in here to raise money for this program? And she knew about Healing Transitions and loved the idea and all that kind of thing. And originally I was like, maybe I'll raise a couple $1,000s. I'll just have people. It was a bet with a lot of my F3 friends of, if I go run 100 miles, will you give me a quarter per mile or 50 cents per mile? And a lot of them were like, I'll give you $5 per mile and that kind of thing. So my first year was like a spreadsheet of how many miles I'm going to run, how much these people said they would give me per mile kind of thing. So there's, a little bit of, it was a little tense in there for a while because I didn't, I wasn't that well experienced in ultra running. I was like, maybe I'll go out there and have a bad day and run 30 miles. You never know, that kind of thing. But I ended up doing that in late December and had a great turnout. Didn't know it, but I was going to have several hundred F3 men come out there, people from the community, all that kind of stuff. And my wife Jackie helped me organize it. Really fun race, and ended up raising $30,000 or $40,000 for the program that year. And that was the start of the Oakwood 24. And this December we'll do this will be the sixth one that I've done. And now we're raising, pretty serious money. We last year we had raised over $500,000 between the five. We raised $211,000 last year for the program. And it's just turned into just an incredible local race. It's a lap race in the cemetery, so people come out with their kids. They can bike, walk, all that kind of thing. It's about a 2-mile lap, and we have a bonfire out there and food and fellowship, and participants from the women's and the men's program of Healing Transitions come out, walk, and hang out, and that kind of thing. So just turned into kind of a nice little community event around here.
That's incredible, man. Absolutely amazing how you've brought people together and touched a lot of lives with that by the sound of it, I mean, the world needs more of that kind of thing. It's wonderful work. Wow, okay. I knew there'd be a cool story behind it, but that's a really, really cool story. So well done. And out of the races, I mean, you said just now 17, I think you said 100-mile. I mean, wow, that is something you don't hear every day. I'd like to talk about them all, but we'll be here until next week. So when I have something like this, the way I usually break it down is basically asking people which ones were their personal favorites. So in your case, John, out of those, do you have certain ones that are the most special to you? I mean, I know we've touched on the first one you ever did. I know we've touched on the fundraising and everything. So they're obviously very special. But do you have certain ones that are your favorites? I think it's the best way to break down so many stories that you must have into something something shorter, if that makes sense. So please do take it away with your favorite races in your own words, please.
Yeah, so I'm big into trail running. Like the Oakwood 24 is on pavement in the cemetery, and that first one I did was on pavement. But I love trail running, and I love running in the mountains, particularly the Appalachian Mountains here in in the eastern United States. So I've done a lot of cool races. I've done some. One of my favorites around here is called the Hellbender 100. It's over near Asheville, North Carolina. It goes up over Mount Mitchell in the Black Mountains with a lot of elevation. It's like 22,000 up, 22,000 down kind of thing. So that's one of my favorites. I just got done my third one back in May of this year. Then I've done some really fun races out west too. I did this Three Bears race out in Idaho that was just fantastic. It was really cool. And I've done the Wasatch Front 100 out in Utah as well, which was a point-to-point race. It was really fun. And then, I'm looking forward to this race out in Montana, and it should be really fun too. I've never run anything out in Montana. It's really beautiful country, grizzly country out there, real remote kind of place. So it should be a fun time. But it's hard to put like, well, what is my favorite race? They're all very unique. But it would have to be a mountain trail running course for sure. And I think probably that hometown race of the Hellbender is such a really hard, unique race up there, which I'll probably keep going back to, as far as I can see in the future to run would be my favorite.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm aware when I ask that question, it's a big question with everything you've achieved, and it can't be easy to answer, but I appreciate you narrowing that down a little bit. And we'll talk about the future more in just a moment, but I have to also ask, with the different terrain that you run in your life, and especially giving mention to the trail running side of things and everything like that, what would you say is the toughest terrain that you've actually had to run across, whether it's one whole race, whether it's just part of a race? I mean, I don't know, this could come in different forms, but you mentioned about one there being quite tough, and ultra running itself is, it's tough, man. I mean, you've got to have like a will of iron, I can really get that vibe from you. But are there any that stand out as being like the most challenging, where you had to push through and really grit your teeth the most to get through it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think the hardest parts that I've experienced on these is just adverse weather. Like, I've been caught in some really hot situations and some really cold situations, particularly both during the Hellbender 100 and some nasty storms up on high ridges and things like that. So when you combine, a lot of real steep running, the trails up there are very, very technical. Some people would be like, man, you're actually running down this thing. There's some areas where it's actually just kind of like bouldering. So it's a really tough course. But I would say, the trail running in the higher elevations with extreme weather is kind of the hardest part to most of this.
Yeah.
And then there's also an opposite side to that. The Oakwood 24, which most people would think is easy, is also really difficult for me because there's several hundred people coming in, which I know a lot of them, and there's always 40 or 50 new people that come in, but the whole time I'm running, there's someone that wants to talk to you the entire time. And a lot of people laugh at this. It's like, if you've ever tried to run for 24 hours while you're talking to somebody the entire time, it can get exhausting too. And I'm not exactly the most talkative guy, but anybody, it's like, go run for 20 hours and try to talk to someone the entire time. But that's another aspect of the Oakwood 24 that's really hard for me is, man, sometimes it's got to be like, guys, I love you guys, but I'm just going to run the next hour and just listen to you guys talk kind of thing. So those are kind of two end of the spectrum difficulties I've found in ultra running.
Yeah, man, that's amazing, because they're things you wouldn't think of unless you've actually been involved more up close and personal. And I have to ask as well, I mean, running for the amount of hours that you do, and other ultra runners, obviously, when I've had these men and women on the show, it never fails to amaze me, the length of time that we're talking about here. So going back to what you said earlier, do you manage that by breaking it down into steps? 'Cause I know you touched on this earlier, instead of you're not looking at it, right, I'm going to run 100 miles, you're looking, I'm going to run into sections. Or what goes through your mind, hour by hour, or as you hit various marker points, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, so it all depends on the race too, but I'm big into discipline, and at this point, my mindset is that there's not really a choice. Like, I'm going out, like the Oakwood 24 usually starts at 9 a.m. I know I'm going out to run till 9 a.m. the next morning, and it's just getting through certain points in the race. Like, man, it's hot out here. Once the sun goes down, everything will be fine. I love running at night. I train early in the morning, so it's like, late December. It's a 13-hour night here. Once I get through the night, the sunlight will give me some hope, and then I'll only be a few hours from the finish. The trail races, it's like usually I'm going to make it to the next aid station. They usually have a sign, or some people will tell you, hey, it's 11 miles to the next aid station. It's up 3,000 feet, down 2,000. And it's like, I'll just get to that next aid station, and then I'll find out my task for the next one and go to the next one, kind of thing. And then, you can break it down more into moments too. Sometimes it's like, man, I'm just getting to the top of this bridge, and then I'm going to regroup mentally, and then I'm going to keep going. But
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is, barring some, bad accident, is whatever I'm going through, I'm gonna keep moving forward, because it's gonna get better. Even if you have little niggles, things that hurt, or you're exhausted or dehydrated, you can usually overcome those things. And say, hey, I'm really low point right now. This is probably the lowest point I'm going to get, and if I keep going, in 2 hours, I'll be looking back at this moment and say, hey, that sucked, but it wasn't that bad. I feel better now, kind of thing.
Yeah. And you know what's cool about that, John, is it factors back into daily life, doesn't it? Or into other challenges that people may face. You can apply that to life itself, which I think is absolutely incredible. So, okay, I want to touch on something else here. Obviously, just mentioning your recovery, because you've obviously been recovered for a long time, sober for a few years. But I just want to very briefly get your advice for people who might be going through, a little bit of what you went through with regards to physical exercise and having things to focus on, and just some of the lessons you've learned along the way. Because I'm asking this at this point because you've transformed your life from one end to another, and all these races illustrate it. And before we go into the future, and talk about what you've got coming up, I thought it would be very powerful to ask you, if there's anyone listening to this over here in the UK, Europe, or over there in the States, or any part of the world, who's going through what you went through, or they know somebody who is. Obviously, we have a golden opportunity here to pass along a little bit of wisdom for them, even if they may never meet you in person, if that makes sense. So, what would be something you would say to those people who are struggling, or they know someone who's struggling in terms of how to get out of that situation and everything?
Yeah, the biggest part for me was, and a lot of people have problems with this, is just asking for help. That's what plagued me for so long. I was so scared to be truthful with someone and admit that, hey, man, I'm messed up. I need help, or I'm not feeling good today. And I always thought I had to go through all this stuff alone, and that was the biggest issue. Is like, man, I can figure this out. I can do this on my own, kind of thing. And it's so much easier once you get into recovery, and look at life. And all these people that are around me in these different programs and races a lot of them have been doing it longer than me. They've been through the same stuff I've been through. So it's like, ask for help, ask for advice. Like, and I do that in my recovery, in my business life, um, in my relationship with my wife and my son now. It's, you know, I know somebody that's been through all this stuff before, so why not get free advice from someone, Um, and if you're going through something, somebody's been through that, particularly in just about any AA group. Whatever you're going through that you think is so bad, somebody's been there, done that, and come through it on the other side. So ask for help. Ask someone how they got through it. And if they don't know, they can usually get you in touch with someone who can. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I say, it's just a powerful opportunity that hopefully that wisdom will filter on down and just reach a couple of people, a handful of people who may not have heard it otherwise. And like I said at the beginning, if we do that, our work is done. So, um, a lot of races, a lot of miles, but a lot yet to come as well, John, isn't there? There's obviously the upcoming race in Montana that you mentioned. But I would just like to get a feel for your future plans, really, as far forward in time or as close to the present day. I don't mind how far you want to go, but just talk to us a little bit about some of the things that are lighting your fire now that you would like to achieve in the future, basically. Let's get a little feel for that, please.
Yeah, so I haven't mentioned yet, but I also um, found that there was a shortage of some trail ultra marathons around Raleigh. So I'm also a race director now. I started a couple races. I have a big race called the MST 100 endurance races up at Falls Lake, where I host a 100-mile ultra marathon. We got a 50-mile 50K option, and then I kind of race direct some smaller trail races. Obviously, do the Oakwood 24, which is a big hit these days. So I love putting on races too, watching people overcome things, marking the course, all that stuff. I just love, and being there to help people, I see it from a different side of the race. From instead of running, being on the other side of race directing is something I really enjoy, and I hope to plan on adding a couple more races here in the future, keep things going. I've also got a 20-month-old son named Alexander that's just been so wonderful for me. I've got a wonderful wife named Jackie, and we're raising him, and that's a huge light in my life right now is watching him grow up, being there for him, hopefully teaching him a lot of things that I didn't get taught when I was younger about how to deal with things. But anyway, it's just creating a bright future for him right now, and for my family and things like that. Obviously, ultra running, I love doing, traveling and going and doing races. And I've had my wife crew me on a lot of them. Hopefully, when my son gets a little bit older, he'll be able to travel with us and go, hang out at the aid stations and that kind of thing. And I've also changed things up, from my work life as well. I was able to start my own company here in Raleigh with a couple guys. Started a stormwater management company that I'm part owner of now as well. So it's building this business as opposed to working for somebody, and how I deal with that, and hire people, and build a company and that kind of thing. So there's some unique challenges I have going, but all stuff that's really positive and going in the right direction right now. That hopefully I'll be able to help people out in more than one way. So.
Yeah, that is incredible. I mean, it's not just the racing, but race directing, for you're a family man, entrepreneur. I mean, that is incredible. As I said before, with the transformation that you've been through as a person. I'm really glad you mentioned that, John, because it shows the different sides of your life. And it shows you as a person, not just as an athlete, if that makes sense, and gives people a little bit more depth for that. So absolutely, absolutely incredible. I'm sure the future is very, very bright. What would be your advice for people, ultra running specific now, of people who are looking to work their way up, maybe from a shorter distance, like a regular marathon distance or something else, and they want to do the whole ultra running 100-mile thing, or even if it's less, even if there's one of these 50, 60, 70-mile races, what would your advice be to runners out there, if there was anything you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, my advice is just go try it. Have fun in the process. And I like racing, but I truly like the process of getting there too. And I don't particularly train any particular way for races these days. I train a little bit different for big mountain races, but it's just me loving to run and getting out there. And the main thing is, it's almost like a meditation for me to go trail running in the mornings. I usually start about 4 a.m. Sun comes up in the woods. Sometimes I run alone. Sometimes I run with a group of guys in recovery. We just have a great time. I've already had so much fun in the morning by 7 a.m. It's just wild to me. So the biggest thing is, and the thing I struggle with at the beginning is you don't always have to run all these big mileage weeks. I spend a lot of time on my feet at work. I do a lot of cross training. So you don't have to focus on the miles, just focus on having a strength training, having a fit body all around, will take you a lot further than making sure you run 80 miles every week kind of thing. You have to be balanced. If you're not balanced, you'll get injured. I've been through a lot of overuse injuries and kind of figured it out a lot by now to where I can maintain the amount of volume that I put in. But you got to be happy doing it all too. You can't be over obsessed with anything. So it's a fine balance of finding joy in all this stuff. And yeah, that's about the advice I have now. So.
Some good advice, though. I mean, it's brilliant because it's things that you've learned. Some of them you've learned the good way, some of them you've learned the hard way. But either way, they're lessons you can share to pass along. And pretty much the last thing I have, or the last couple of things, actually, I'll say two more things to touch on. Um, I often give people an opportunity in these interviews to thank the people that have helped them. So one of the things I would like to touch on with yourself, John, is if there's anybody, I mean, you've mentioned a number of the people, Charlie, you've mentioned the recovery group, your wife, different people, but is there anyone else who's helped you along the way in terms of sponsors, in terms of people who've donated money? I mean, that's probably a long list, as you said earlier, with $5 a mile. So I don't know if we can get into all of that, but just to open it up for people you'd like to give a mention to who maybe they've helped you a lot in your life, but to the outside world, they're sort of behind the scenes in a way, if that makes sense. And it'd be good to give anyone a mention. Is there anyone else like that, or have we covered everyone so far?
Yeah, and particularly it's like Charlie Engel gave me a huge boost. There's a guy named Chris Butnick, the executive director at Healing Transitions. That's been a huge influence, positive influence in my life that I still work with for the Oakwood 24. He's been a huge part of my life. Then there's the men of this F3 organization that are an awesome group of men that took me in when I was going through the Healing Transitions program. Didn't judge me, didn't ask me questions about the past, just looked at me for who I was. And I've created lifelong friendships with them of guys that are, we have this circle of trust at the end of each workout we'll do in the morning. We work out very early in the morning, and men are transparent, they're real. Emotions are raw out there. They share what they're going through in hopes of, not only getting it out of their system, but helping what other guys are going through as well. So, I got to give huge credit to that whole organization and the men that I've met. It's kind of a regional thing. It's in all different cities. I've met men in F3 Boone and Wilmington and Greensboro and things like that. I also got to touch on, my parents both passed away suddenly in 2020. They were a huge influence for me. I was glad I was able to straighten up my life and get sober and have them be able to witness that, as well as my brother as well. And lastly, I had a great sponsor that was my first sponsor, an older gentleman named Danny that sponsored me in Alcoholics Anonymous and kept me in there the first few years while I was kind of a basket case, and he passed away as well. But, those people were a huge influence in my life. When I look back on it, where would I be today without them? I don't know. It'd be a completely different world. And then that program, Healing Transitions, 12-month program, it's all, there's nobody, everybody that works at that program went through the program. So it's mainly volunteers, guys giving back. without that place, I don't know what would happen to me, because I wasn't in to going anywhere else. So those are the most influential things in my life right now. And then obviously finding a higher power, letting a lot of this stuff go. And then the 12-step programs as well. So
Yeah. It's good to give them a mention, John, for the wider world. We'll wrap this up shortly. There's a small detail I meant to ask you earlier, and I just want to ask you just to underpin this. How many years, if you don't mind me asking, have you actually been sober now altogether? Obviously, it's quite a while, but I was just curious.
yeah, August 19th, 2016 is my sobriety date. So one day at a time until then. I know we're late July now, but it'll be 7 years in just a few weeks. So.
Wow, that is incredible, and it gives people so much hope. And there's another small detail I missed. I meant to ask you, but you said about when you were getting into shape. I think you said you were 36 or something like that. You said you were out of shape. You were getting into shape at that time. If you don't mind me asking, just as a small detail here, when you actually did your first ultra race to now, how old are you? Because from the sound of it, it's not a polite question, but I'm thinking that it sounds like age is just a number for you. And, you've achieved a lot of these things later in life when a lot of people would have given up by then. So I mean this as a compliment to you, even though it may not sound like it. But if you don't mind me asking, what is the sort of age chronology of your age you were through your races, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so I guess I was 35, just turning 36 when I first came into recovery, and I'm 41 now. I'll be 42 in September. But I'll take it that the other thing Charlie Engle and Rich Roll instilled in me in their books, and knowing Charlie, was a plant-based diet, which I've done. They were like, try it. If you don't like it, then you don't have to. And I tried it, and I've been mostly vegan, besides a little bit of seafood every now and then, for over 5 years now, and just really love it. It's changed my life and the way I eat and my health, dramatically. I think just being able to cut a lot of that stuff out, never feeling bloated, all that kind of stuff just kind of goes hand in hand with fitness and everything else that I'm trying to do is eating a clean diet.
Yeah. That's some good advice for people as well. And thank you for mentioning that, because I just thought, oh, I better ask you before we wrap this up, because obviously the years of sobriety, absolutely amazing. But obviously the age thing, I'm a big believer age is just a number. But to be quite honest, I think it's really cool how you started at what some people would regard as a late age, and you've achieved all this in that time, because it also shows people it's never too late. Remember, I'm all about inspiration. How many people think they're over the hill? How many times do you hear that? But it's only up here. So I just wanted to ask that because you illustrate that. Last question, I'll let you go then. You've got things to do with your day and your family. Obviously it's our evening over here, but you've got your day to go. So I'll let you go soon. But real simple one. People want to reach out to you, they want to get hold of you, they want to find out more about what you do, get involved in the races, even if they want to inquire with you about recovery or anything. How can people reach you on social media and everything like that?
Yeah, so we can put some contact information up when you post this, but I'm on Facebook as John Fry, JONFREY. If you wanted to hit me up on there. If you wanted to get involved with the Oakwood 24, you can simply Google Oakwood 24 Healing Transitions, and it'll pop up. There's signups there about how you can get involved. I don't mind sharing my email and things like that. So if there's anybody, that's the biggest thing about all this. And I try to end my talks in AA like that. If you want help, reach out to me. Like, I don't care where you are, who you are, what you're going through, that kind of thing. I'm available. You can get my phone number. If I can't help you, I'll find somebody that can. Is the biggest thing. So, if you have some moment of clarity watching this thing and you want to reach out to me, I'll do what I can to help anyone. That's the biggest part of all this is, how can I help the next guy that's coming in? Because I was there at one point, and there were only a few guys when I look back on it that I really connected with, that were able to keep me in AA. If it hadn't been for those few guys, I might have, gone a different direction and had a different life as of right now. So, we can post my contact information on here, but I'm open all the time. Doesn't matter what time of day or anything like that. Just reach out.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know you're an open book like that, and I know we connected on Facebook and everything, but it goes to show people can reach out if they need to. John, I'd like to thank you for your time, but more than that, I would like to thank you for being an open book and um, not to sound corny or anything, but really speaking from your heart. Because when we've done this talk, you've talked about some very personal things. We've gone deep into a few aspects of your life. I'm sure we've just scratched the surface, but we've got some incredible content. So I just want to thank you for making the time for this, yes, but more importantly, sharing everything you've shared straight from your heart, basically, because that's the way it's come over to me listening to you, and our audience will pick that up as well. So just a big thank you to you, to be honest.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for reaching out. I appreciate it, and it's just all I can do to give back is just tell people what happened to me. So I
Yeah.
appreciate everything.
Well, you just keep it up because you're again, not to sound corny or anything, but you're like a light in the darkness in a way. You sort of show people what's possible by doing what you do. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.